in the Princeton basketball team that started off the year 4-6 and now have won 13 straight games and have a very good chance of winning the Ivy League and going to the NCAA tournament. So let's talk to the voice of the Princeton Tigers basketball team, and that is Derek Jones. Derek, Zach Gelb here, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. Appreciate a few minutes, and how are you?
Very well. Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it, Zach.
Well, I appreciate you coming on today. So this has been a Princeton team that we knew they were going to be good when the season started, but then they lost two key players. Like I said, they started off the year 4-6. The team was looking a little bit down in the dumps when you look at that record, and then they pulled off a streak of 13 games in a row. During this streak, since you watch and call every game so closely, what have you seen out of this team that got them to win 13 games in a row and hopefully keep this thing going?
Well, I think one of the big keys for them is they just got settled in. I mean, they were playing not only a difficult schedule to start the year, but as you mentioned, with the personnel changes, with Hans Brace suffering the season-ending knee injury, and then the injury and departure of Henry Caruso, those things kind of happened quickly, not back-to-back, but in short order near each other. So I think that really made things difficult as far as Princeton really getting settled in as far as the lineup goes. And then finally, after that Monmouth game when they hit the road against Bucknell, that was the first win of the 13. You could start to see that they were putting things together. Even in the Monmouth game a little bit offensively, you could see it was starting to work. But I think the big key for them, without a doubt here over this 13-game stretch, has been defensively and the play of Stephen Cook along with Miles Stevens and Spencer White.
And that was a game against Monmouth where it was up there and they lost by 6 points. And I thought that could have possibly been a little bit of a turning point even with the loss, like you just said. Looking back at that Monmouth game, I don't think anyone could have seen they would have won 13 straight. But do you remember maybe a few plays maybe in the Monmouth game or the Bucknell game that got them to this point that you said, okay, this team has the potential to be really special?
Well, I think more so in the Bucknell game. I mean, one of the things that hounded them early on in the beginning of the year was the fact that in some of these games they would take leads, but whenever the team, and most of these were on the road too, I mean, when they got a lot of pushback, they weren't able to recover. I think the Bucknell game, to me, second half, Bucknell made some runs at them, and they were able to hold them off. And I think you look at the play of a guy like Miles Stevens, you know, he had a big baseline dunk in that game against Bucknell, and it was after Bucknell hit a big shot about midway through the second half. You could see right there that was something that was starting to come up for the Tigers. When somebody makes a run, you come back at them with a big bucket of your own. And I think plays like that have been littered throughout this 13-game winning streak.
I've always been a fan of the coach and Mitch Henderson, but still, we have to remember these are kids at the college level, and they do have emotions, and you see the way they started and then all the injuries. It wouldn't be a bad coaching job if the team checked out a little bit and got down in the dumps. But with Mitch Henderson, he really did save this season with his tone and the way that he handles these kids. Just how about the coaching job with Coach Henderson?
I thought, it's funny. It's funny. I was watching a game last night. I think it may have been the Duke-Syracuse game. They flashed up Coach of the Year, and they showed some of the guys they were considering for that. And it made me think of Coach Henderson and the job he's done this year because, you know, we mentioned the big injuries and the departures for Princeton, but, you know, he also had a guy in Amir Bell who had started every game in his career that he benched, you know, going into the Hawaii trip against Cal and then Hawaii the game after that. And that was another change. And on top of that, he's had to juggle some switching of the coaching staff too. I can't say enough about the job that he has done this year because he's made the guys buy in to what he does and they perform accordingly. And I think that's a great sign of the head coach when you can go through a slow start and then put together a streak like this. I think that says that you're headed in the right direction in terms of coaching.
Since you're around the team a lot more than we are, and you get to see one of those assistant coaches like a Kerry Kittles come on board, and Mitch Henderson called it a no-brainer to bring him in with his background in the collegiate game and then also the NBA at the professional level. What have you seen out of Coach Kittle's this year?
This is his first coaching job, so that's one of the things I think that might surprise people as far as seeing him on the bench right now. He seems to be very settled in, brings in a lot of experience as far as his playing time, obviously in the NBA, but also his tremendous success with Villanova, and he's able to really instill confidence in the players. I remember seeing throughout early on in the year, one of the Tigers who was struggling a great deal was Amir Bell, and mentioning the benching early on, he was a guy, even after they had benched him, they'd bring him in, and he was really struggling to find his shot. And I remember on numerous occasions during games, you would see Amir walk off to the sideline, and one of the first people there to greet him was Coach Kittle, trying to keep him mentally engaged and on a consistent basis to get that confidence back up. And it's paid off because now Amir Bell is playing some of the best basketball of his career during this streak. So I think he can only get better to me as a coach, because this is his first go around. But what he's brought to the table, I think, has been a big help. Very well prepared, and he gets the team along with the rest of the coaching staff ready to go.
The voice of the Princeton Tigers, Derek Jones, right now with us on the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920, the jersey powered by Corona and Corona Light. Before we get to this tournament that's coming up in not that many days away, you got some games coming up between Columbia, Cornell, Harvard, and Dartmouth before you get ready to go over to the Cathedral of College Basketball in the Palestra. How do you keep the focus in these final 4 games before the team gets ready for the games in the Palestra?
I think one of the big things that's going to help this team is the fact that nobody has been through this yet. So I think because of that, I think there's going to be more of an understanding of we need to keep doing what we're doing to make sure when we get to the Palestra we're ready to take care of business. I think that's one of the keys here. Talking to Coach Henderson, he's made mention of that. He said, when asked how do I handle this, well, there really isn't a template in the Ivy League, considering this is the first Ivy League tournament, for coaches and players on how to handle it. So I think for a team that is 10-0, has a spot in the tournament already, is more than likely going to be the number 1 seed, those type of things, I think you're not going to know really how to deal with that experience because you haven't been through it yet together as a group. So I think in the next few games, you just have to keep doing what you're doing. This is a senior group, a veteran group. I don't think there's going to be an issue of them taking the foot off the gas, because this is not a situation of maybe, Yale of the last couple of years, the Harvard teams that won Ivy League titles where, year after year, they knew at the end of the day they were going to be in the mix and have an opportunity to win the Ivy League title. In this situation here, the Tigers and everyone else for that matter who's going to be in the tournament, they haven't been to this point. So I think for them, it should be business as usual on a game-in, game-out basis here for the next 4.
Derek, we know for that tournament, the Ivy League tournament coming up at the Palestra, that the Princeton fan will travel well because it's not that far of a commute. I make it every day, except I do it the reverse way on the way into work. But then coming home, I travel from Princeton to Philadelphia. But you look at Penn, who probably will be the 4th seed in the Ivy League. Does Penn scare you a little bit? I know that Princeton's a better basketball team, clearly, but just because of the home court advantage Penn will have, does that at all scare you a little bit if you were Princeton? Now I'm in the minority on this, at least from what I've seen online. I would not be that worried about that. It's funny, they played 2 games this year. Now I know Penn is obviously very hot right now. The Penn played Princeton better in the initial matchup this year at Princeton than they did at the Palestra a few weeks ago. Now, obviously, if they meet a third time, things and feelings will be a little bit different going into that. I got to be honest with you. If I were making the call on how to perhaps go about a tournament situation like this, I would like to see a little bit more protection given to the number 1 seed, because that's a tough spot to put a top seed in, having to essentially play somebody who
is a regular habitant of that building. So you're playing Penn in their building potentially. That could be a very tough contest. But I think, yes, are the Tigers a better team? I think so, and obviously the records carried it out that way. But as far as, maybe being a little hesitant about playing them, I think this Tigers team will be ready for whatever happens that first game out on March 11th. Obviously, if it's Penn, that will make things maybe a little bit more difficult than maybe seeing Columbia or somebody like that on a little bit more of a neutral floor setting.
Derek Jones with us, wrapping up with the voice of the Princeton Tigers basketball team. In these next 4 games, like we said, Columbia, Cornell, Harvard, and Dartmouth, we know 3 of them should be very easy, but the tough one could be Harvard, just the way that they're playing this year. When you see the Harvard basketball team, what stands out to you?
They have a lot of talented players. I think, the question for me with them is, on a week-to-week basis, how much better are they going to be than the week before? I think, when they played Princeton back on February the 4th, that was a great game, a lot of electricity in the building. A lot of the young players, they made some big shots, but you could see some of the growing pains as far as making mistakes go. I remember when I first started covering this league, one of the first things I heard from people watching the league who had covered the league prior said, this is a league that is often determined by the seniors. I think if you're Harvard and going into an Ivy League tournament setting, if you can somehow kind of harness together all of that talent and youth, they could be very dangerous. I think you're right. That on paper may very well be Princeton's toughest challenge on the remaining 4. And then that's obviously a game we could see down the line in the Ivy League tournament as well. But I think they're a very talented team. Siani Chambers obviously knows Mitch Henderson and the Tigers very well, as he's a fifth-year senior. So, they're a tremendous team, I think, but the youth is going to be, to me, the biggest question. Can they overcome that late in the year?
When you win 13 games, we all know confidence is going to be at an all-time high level. And we've seen Ivy League teams, when they get into the big dance of the NCAA tournament, go on runs. With this team, will they be a little bit all apprehensive if they get to the NCAA tournament, or is this more of a loose bunch when you look at Princeton?
I don't see some of the tightness maybe you've seen in certain spots prior. I don't see that necessarily with this group, and you can kind of tell because you look at some of these games that they've played, especially in the Ivy League games, there haven't been that many walkover outings for them where they've simply just been, winning games by 15, 20 points a contest. So I think they should be used to that. And I think definitely the pre-conference schedule for them should have them well prepared for whatever it is they're going to see and whoever it is they're going to see in the NCAA tournament. I know Joe Lunardi just came out with his latest bracketology pairing, and it has Princeton against Duke as a 4 versus 13 matchup. I'd love to see that. But, whoever it's against, and if they are fortunate enough to get there, I think this is a team that mentally there's a lot of leadership there, and I think they'll be mentally tough and ready to handle it.
Before we let you run, as Derek Jones joins us right now, I know you gave us some good perspective on Amir Bell with the early struggles and then what he's turned into this year. And we knew Bell was going to be a good player for the Tigers. Just give me an interesting nugget or two about this team. Let's say if no one's ever watched them and they start tuning in and following this Princeton team.
Well, I think they are not the conventional Princeton team. I remember doing an interview earlier this year with someone where they were hinting that this was the Princeton teams of Pete Carrill, where it's backdoor and all that type of thing. They still have certain elements of that, no question about it. But this is a team that loves to shoot three-pointers. This is a team that loves to attack you on the dribble or off the dribble. So as far as Nuggets go, I think this is a team that is very active from the three-point line as well. And defensively, too, I think this is a team that's very underrated defensively. When you take a look at their games here over this 13-game run, I mean, really, their defense since that Monmouth outing has been tremendous. They've only allowed 70 points in one game in their last 13, and that was the first game in the streak to win at Bucknell. So I think you look defensively, I think they've been able to really forge an identity on that side of it. And then, too, offensively, this is a team that loves to shoot, loves to get up and down the floor, which is something I think that a lot of people don't necessarily associate Princeton basketball with based off of their history.
Derek, great stuff. We'll see you at the Palestra coming up for the big 2 games, and hopefully we'll see Princeton cutting down the nets and punching their ticket to the NCAA tournament. Good luck, and thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity, Zach. I appreciate it. Take care.